Welcome back, America. We're here with our friend, Professor Alan Dershowitz of Harvard Law School. Now, Alan Dershowitz, I listened very carefully to the president of Harvard, and he says, we're victims here. All we're trying to do is have academic freedom. All we're trying to do is hire the right people. Yet we have a horrific problem with anti-Semitism. We're trying our very best to get on top of this. Alan Dershowitz, you're a Harvard man. What would you like to say to the president of Harvard and all those who are making excuses for Harvard?
Just remember the 1950s in Southern schools when presidents of universities were saying, all we want to do is teach white supremacy to our students. All we want to do is have Ku Klux Klan people coming in with masks and harassing black students. That's part of our academic freedom. No, no, no. Harvard cannot use academic freedom as an excuse and a justification for teaching anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. It's a structural problem. It goes deep. The DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, is anti-Semitic to its core. Intersectionality, black theory, racial theory, queer theory, they're all part of this attempt to try to promote a worldview that is essentially anti-American, anti-Semitic. The universities are not doing enough about it. And so the federal government has to step in the way they did in the 1950s when they have to step in to prevent segregation and discrimination against black people. You cannot distinguish between discriminating against blacks on the one hand and discriminating against Jews on the other hand and Christians on the other hand. So the federal government has a role to play here, and it should play it constructively, and it shouldn't be afraid of taking on these claims of academic freedom and freedom of speech because they're applying a double standard.
And in fact, Alan Dershowitz, the Supreme Court had to admonish Harvard, didn't it, on submission policies when it was discriminating against Asians. So obviously, the government has some role to see what Harvard's doing, because Harvard has a long history in the 30s of playing footsie with the Nazis in the Third Reich. And they, even as recently as a few years ago, they had to be told, no, you can't apply racist policies against Asian students for the admission of this. They act like they're above the fray. They act like they're the ones promoting freedom, academic freedom and free speech and everything. It's quite the contrary, as you point out. And so my question to you is this. Hillsdale College doesn't take a penny in federal money. They don't take a penny in state money. They don't even take students that have government grants because they say, we don't want to be told what to do. From the left. They have to do X, Y, Z. And the left is always telling colleges and universities what they have to do when they run the government. And here, President Trump, and God bless President Trump on this, Alan, but here President Trump is saying, you know what? You don't get $2.2 billion in federal tax dollars. You know what else? You don't get a tax-exempt status. These are privileges on that massive endowment you have. You want to fund things, then go ahead and fund them. But we have some requirements. No, we're not interested in everything that's going on in the classroom and every professor you hire, but this is bigger than that. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, Harvard is cheating. I can tell you that from personal experience. The Supreme Court ruled that it could not use race as a basis for admission and implicitly as a basis for hiring. It still does it. It just disguises race in other ways. Now, nobody wants to take away federal funding for cancer research, Alzheimer's research. What we want to take away is federal funding for the Carr Center, for example, a center at the Kennedy School that promotes anti-Americanism, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. We want to take money, federal funding away from the Middle East Studies Department, from other departments which are promoting propaganda. They aren't educating. They're not helping Americans. In order to get a tax exemption under the Jones case, you have to show that you're helping the national interest. And a lot of the things that Harvard is doing today is not helping the national interest. Look, Harvard's going to compromise in the end. How do I know that? Because I know the lawyers they hired. They hired 2 lawyers who were close to the Trump administration. So on the one hand, they're sending out macho statements, we're never going to compromise, we're going to fight every inch of the way. On the other hand, they're sending in 2 negotiators. In the end, there'll be a resolution. Money will go to funding research, scientific research, but it won't go to funding propaganda.
I just want to emphasize to the audience here, it's Donald Trump who believes in free speech and academic freedom. That's why he's taking these people on. And it's Donald Trump who's trying to protect the Jewish students, not Harvard. And it's Donald Trump that has an all-of-government, hands-on movement to fight anti-Semitism in this country, and he deserves an enormous amount of credit. And Alan, that includes these left-wing Jewish groups who are now attacking Donald Trump and really giving all kinds of aid and comfort to the anti-Semites out there, don't you think?
I agree completely. Look, Chuck Schumer the other day said they're using anti-Semitism as an excuse for the Republicans to be, attacked. No, Donald Trump, I know him, cares deeply about anti-Semitism, cares deeply about the American public, and I think he ought to be praised for his efforts in trying to prevent universities from being turned into propaganda mills against American values and against America's allies. So 3 cheers for what he's doing, and make sure he does it right so that research is not cut off from legitimate purposes, but it is cut off for illegitimate purposes, and Harvard has many of those.
Well, maybe another day we can discuss that, too. I'm all for legitimate spending of money, but I don't know why they're sitting on $53 billion in tax-exempt money. If they want to do research on Alzheimer's, well, let them kick in some money. Let them do it. I happen to believe in research on Alzheimer's because I have a family member who suffers from it. We'll be right back.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.